Welcome to Beyond the Scale, True Healing. If this is your first time here, thanks for checking out our channel. If you've been following us, thanks for coming back.
Today, we are talking with hormone and metabolic guru, Dani Conway. Dani is a functional medicine practitioner who has been very active in the keto and carnivore space for quite a while. Welcome, Dani, and thank you for being here with us. We are going to start off with asking, what brought you to carnivore?
So first, thank you ladies for having me. I'm honored to be here. So what brought me to carnivore, I guess, could I give a little backstory for a second, is that in 2006, I was tired of the dieting, tired of the yo-yos, tired of the restricting food. And at that point, I found low carb, into keto, didn't really know exactly what I was doing, honestly, because there was no social media, there was no Facebook groups, Instagram, all of that. And so at that point, I had transitioned into a low carb lifestyle. And then over the years, over the next few years, there was plenty of times where I would, have meals where I just enjoyed meat only and I didn't have vegetables. But where I truly came into carnivore was around 2013. I had actually had breast implant surgery because I was in my mid-30s and I thought that, vanity, I was approaching 40. I made this decision to get breast implants. And 3 weeks after that surgery, I had a significant flare-up of digestive issues and some other stuff that had happened. I did not connect it with the surgery. I actually blamed it on the anesthesia and the drugs. And at that point, I could only tolerate meals with either bone broth itself or just meat. And so that's how I fell into carnivore, was not being able to tolerate other foods after that surgery. And I just started, doing bone broth fasting and eating meat because I couldn't tolerate other foods.
Can I ask a question? It's not related to that history that you had, but I want to ask about being metabolically healthy. So after someone has been on carnivore or keto for a while, how can you tell when you're finally healing metabolically, and do leptin resistance, insulin resistance, those things play a part in that? How do you know when you're kind of on the mend?
So what I see very often is a lot of the non-scale victories. So the energy improves, the energy feels more balanced throughout the day. Someone's not experiencing the highs and lows of energy crashes. Someone is sleeping better, sleeping through the night, more quality sleep. They are feeling more balanced with energy throughout the day. They might start to lose weight. So I definitely believe that weight loss happens as a byproduct of the body being healthy and in balance. So that becomes part of those NSVs, non-scale victories. I love that you guys call this beyond the scale, because it is so much about what's, beyond the scale. But really a lot of the symptoms start to dissipate. And then from like a lab perspective or lab work, if someone was to get their blood chemistry done, before and after, or, that type of thing, they would start to see those markers improving as well.
I was wondering, Dani, if I could ask you, so we know there's like a high fat trend going on right now. A lot of people that found standard carnivore wasn't really helping them to lose weight, or they had stalled, are finding success with the higher fat. My question is, does the addition of a lot of dietary fat ketone raise ketone readings artificially? Like if we say ketones of 4 or whatever, is it because we're adding so much fat and that's just what's circulating, or is it still an accurate measure of what you're actually producing for ketones?
So I think it could go both ways, and I think it depends on the time of day that you're actually testing. So somebody might eat a high fat diet, meals, high amount of fat in general, and test later on in the day, and you might be seeing a byproduct of the fat that they ate. If you're testing fasted in the morning, you're going to be seeing a byproduct more of what their metabolism is doing. So in both cases, you could potentially see higher levels of ketones. If you see lower levels of ketones in the morning and higher later in the day, you might, one person might say, oh, well, this person might be, maybe they're not keto adapted. Maybe they're struggling to make their own ketones without the presence of fat, that type of thing. So I do think that, that's the difference.
So still the circulating ketones, say it's not a fasted level, that's still a good thing. Yes.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think it's like a false positive per se, in terms of, if you're seeing ketones because somebody ate fat, I don't think that's a bad thing.
Right. Okay. That was my question. Perfect. Thank you.
But so if we are taking stuff like MCTs or that raise a lot the ketones, and so if we are like in the ketogenic state already, like having ketones around 1 or 2, and then we are having higher ketones due to what we are eating, is there any benefit of having these high ketones, or because they're only brought by the diet and for a couple of hours there is no benefit for having that much ketone on our body?
I think there's benefits to having higher ketones if the person's body is truly keto adapted, meaning that they're utilizing the ketones that you're seeing, those levels. So some can speculate that, if someone's ketones are in the 6 or 7 range, that they might not actually be utilizing them. So the body has to be able to be adapted to be utilizing the ketones as well as having the ketones in circulation. So you want the brain, you want the body to be able to utilize the ketones like you would, nutrients for fuel, nutrients for energy kind of thing.
Okay.
So when we see some people doing really high fat carnivore and having extremely low morning glucose and really high ketones, not everybody can do that. And it gets to be a little frustrating. Like we always say, don't compare yourself and don't do what everybody else is doing and expect the same results. But I've seen a lot of comments to that effect, like just people being discouraged. I did high fat for many, many weeks, but I was having a lot of gastric distress, and my ketones would not go above, I think my highest was 1.8 or something like that. And my glucose, while it was still good, was like upper 70s, lower 80s, or sometimes even higher. So what's the reason for that? Is that an indication that more healing needs to be done, or just not being adapted? How do you get to that point? And is that even necessary?
I don't know that it's necessarily necessary for someone to achieve a glucose level in the 60s or 70s. I think 70s to 80s has, proven to be metabolically a really good place to be, whether or not someone has ketones. That being said, I think that when you're, measuring ketones, measuring glucose, and looking at those numbers, if the glucose numbers are higher, then someone might have other things happening. Like, what are the other hormone levels doing? What is cortisol doing? Cortisol plays a huge role with blood sugar, high morning blood sugar, those types of things. So I think that it's important to realize that sometimes it's not just the picture of the while the glucose and the ketones can tell you about someone's metabolic health, it's not the only measure to consider when someone's working so hard to lower those numbers, and that there could be other things at play, that are contributing factors.
Yeah, I can relate a little bit about the cortisol. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm checking my ketones and my blood sugar on the morning when I'm fasted, when I wake up, if I take time to wake up, to stretch a little bit, to look at the sun, then taking my glucose and ketones number, my glucose number is much lower than if I wake up, drink a cup of water, go and take and test. Like if the cortisol that I release from waking up is out of my body, I think my blood glucose is much lower.
So I don't know that the cortisol is going to necessarily be out of your body, but when you get up and start moving around, your body is starting to use up whatever glucose is in the system. So one hack for individuals who are having that dawn phenomenon, that high morning blood sugar, is to get their bodies moving right away so that you can use up that glucose that's in the system. And I think just movement in general, exercise resistance training, is underutilized as part of this process. And I know various people have different levels of the healing that they have to do and what they can do, energy wise, physical ability wise, all of that. But movement in general is a very important tool when it comes to lowering blood sugar and raising ketones.
That's really, really interesting. And can I ask you, how do you determine the right version for a client? How you would advise to go to high-fat carnivore or to standard carnivore, regarding of the history of people, like with eating disorder or malabsorption, or if they have thyroid disorders or stuff like this? At the beginning, how do you adapt the carnivore diet to your clients?
So I wish there was an easy answer for this.
I'm sure.
The truth is that there's no one size fits all. So that being said, I look at each client. I look at what their history is. I look at what they've done, from a diet standpoint in the last year or two. How long have they been carnivore? What type of carnivore have they been doing? Some of them come to me kind of keto/carnivore, so kind of looking at the same thing. And then look at their, other underlying imbalances as well. I've always had a higher fat approach. So that is something that I truly believe in as far as healing hormones and, satiety and cravings and all of that type of stuff. So in terms of like when it comes down to the nitty gritty of the individual client and which direction I go, I kind of look at what they've been doing and what hasn't worked. And in that same context of what are their complaints and what are the underlying imbalances that they're struggling with. And that's where I kind of determine, which direction of higher, even higher fat than someone who's not struggling with all those complaints might be. I look at their movement, their exercise, what they're doing as far as that goes, working out. I look at what their blood sugar is doing, what level of, all of those things play a role. So I wish I could tell you that there was one way and one answer to do it, but there just isn't. I really do believe that, everyone is individual, and that's kind of how I approach it. So I try to look at each client with a blank slate, in a sense of like, not what I did for the last client of what is this individual person going through and what have they already tried that has or hasn't worked, and then kind of go from there.
Can I ask you a very personal question?
Sure.
But maybe it will help other people. I have been trying to have regular cycle for a couple of months. I stopped using contraceptive pill last November, and since then I have done some blood tests, and my estradiol is going in the good range, and I'm having period, but they are not regular. And I've always been in a very high fat carnivore way of eating, with tons of fat and eating through the day. When we are looking to the recent interviews in the carnivore spheres, we can see Dr. Bright that is advertising for 3 meals a day and a very high fat, but it has been what I've been doing before. On the other hand, you have Dr. Kiltz, I don't know how to say his name, that he's advertising for OMAD with high fat. And I wanted to have your point of view about it. Is OMAD can help on my yeah, to regulate my hormones, because the 3 meals a day high fat hasn't been helping. Knowing that I cannot fast for 24 hours without at least eating fat through my day. I need at least like two snacks of pure fat. I will not be able to do OMAD otherwise.
Okay, so let's see if I can remember all the things that I wanted to say as you were talking, because I think this is so important. So first of all, I think that OMAD does work for a certain amount of people, and I think that OMAD is terrible for other people. So let's just put that out there. That doesn't mean that that either way is wrong, right? So it's not that, you know, every way is wrong or one way is wrong or right. It's like what's right for the individual person. So that being said, first I want to say that when you get off of synthetic hormones, whether it's birth control, any type of hormone replacement kind of thing, that hormone replacement shuts down your hormone receptors and the signals that go from your brain to your body to make hormones in the levels that they should be made. That's like the most simple, non-scientific, you know, way I could describe it. So that being said, if you're telling me that your estrogen ranges or estradiol ranges are starting to come into the normal range, I just want to reiterate, like, that doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't necessarily working, right? So, you know, obviously we don't know what would happen if you weren't eating all the fat that you're eating and you were not eating 3 meals a day, but I would venture to say that what you're doing is working, and it can take months for the body to re-regulate after hormone replacement therapy and, you know, under eating, right? So those two things combined as part of the history play a huge role with hormone health. Now, as far as the OMAD conversation, again, I think that it can work for some and not others. And if you're someone with a background who, you know, is restricted dieting, restricted eating, restricted calories, I think if you can do 1 or 2 meals with a few fat snacks in between, I think that's great. I think there's nothing wrong with that. Whatever you do, you don't want to create more stress, whether it's physiological or mental, because that is what is going to get you away from your goals versus closer to the goals. So if OMAD feels good to someone and it, you know, they can get their nutrients, and I still believe that it shouldn't be every day, and it should be, you know, maybe once or twice a week or a couple times a month, depending on the individual person, I think it can be beneficial. So again, I think it's looking at the background, the history, the individual person, you know, where they've come to this point as far as, you know, goals go. And I do believe that if you're starting to see estradiol in the correct ranges, then whatever you're doing is absolutely helping.
This is really reassuring.
Good. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, because, you know, when you're waiting for results, and for me it's have regulate cycles, but for some it's weight loss, for some it's gain weight, for some it's a lot. When you're waiting for this result, you're getting so much stress when you don't see them, and I'm thinking that the stress you're putting on yourself is not helping with the result you want to achieve, you know.
Of course, that itself will raise cortisol levels. But I think too, it's just we are so inundated with so much information. A lot of us on information overload, depending on who they're watching and what they're saying. So I think that the message can get, you know, convoluted as well, and that's where you can kind of go to the place of wondering, like, is this working? I'm not sure if this is working, and it can be, you know, easy to switch and sort of like think the grass is greener on the other side, when it may actually not be.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Dani, because that's always me. That is always me. If I think that, you know, maybe there's a little bit better way, I have to check it out. I have to try it, you know, and I get so caught up in, you know, seeing other people trying something different. And I get so frustrated with myself, because then I go, what I was doing was working. Why? I just need to trust myself and trust my own reaction and feedback to things, instead of constantly trying to jump on this new thing. If I'm not binging and you know, I'm not starving to death at night and I feel good and I have good energy. Like I need to go with it, you know, and I get in such a place of doubting myself sometimes. So I'm glad that you said that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be patient,
Yeah.
right? Like,
I was gonna say, I
I've
think
been
that
doing this for a week. Nothing's working.
Right.
so I was just gonna
That's
say,
me.
like, that's really common, and I think we just have to look at it like it's kind of like a fine line. I never want someone to be doing something that's making them feel terrible or badly, or, you know, truly isn't giving them results for long periods of time. But I think that, you know, we just kind of have to check ourselves sometimes and make sure that it's not just like because the wind blew this way or that way that someone's shifting what they're doing.
Right. Right. I
Perfect.
think sometimes it's hard in my case because I don't weigh myself ever. Because I will be just, you know, fanatical about it. So I don't have that number to rely on. And in some ways it's helped. And in other ways, like I've found it difficult, but, you know, I'm very much a numbers person. So that has been difficult, but yeah, I think, you know, just trusting when we feel good is such a good way to go, you know. I wanted to ask you kind of a personal thing also, because I've been to the doctors in the last couple of weeks and was terrified to go and ask for blood work that I wanted to have done. Because I worked in the medical field for 20 years and I know you know, I guess I always feel like I know that I am not going to get a good response for asking. So anyway, the result was I couldn't even get a hemoglobin A1C drawn because 18 months ago, I had a good result. And so a year and a half later, the answer was, no, we're not drawing that. So that was like at the top of the list. And I had many more things I wanted to ask for. And they were, I got a reason why on every single thing. But yeah, it's so frustrating. And I just wondered, you know, I know everybody is different and has different things going on, but is there a certain sort of panel that you start out with that you find most helpful for you as a practitioner to draw on people?
Yeah, so when I do a wellness panel or a blood panel with clients, it's got 87 total markers, I think, on it. So I have had, I think, 3 clients in the last year who, when I gave them the list of markers, they've been able to get their doctors to run every single marker on there. So that being said, I just sort of say that because, you know, there's a lot of frustration out there, just like yourself, of like even requesting one extra marker, fasting insulin, they won't do it, you know.
They told me that it didn't exist. I was like, you're taking care of diabetics day and night, and you don't know that there's a fasting insulin level.
Right. So as far as, let me just think of like the most important, you know, CBC with differentials for sure, because those differential markers can tell a lot about what's going on with like bacteria and viral stressors. CRP, homocysteine, fibrinogen, fasting insulin, kind of in the inflammatory blood sugar ranges. Of course, A1C, ferritin, full iron, and a full iron panel as well. Those are kind of some of the more basics that if someone was just going to try to request some extra markers, or of course, complete metabolic panel. It's like, as I'm talking, the list is like getting longer and longer. But I think just in general, those are some of the ones that are most important. And, you know, I think also making sure that that the blood work is interpreted correctly. But of course, the first step is getting the doctor to be able to run those.
I don't know, Claire,
did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, just the frustration is real, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, probably for the last year, I've been like, I really need to go, you know, have a yearly kind of physical and everything. And when I left there was no discussion of even drawing labs. And so I got home and I went, oh, we didn't talk about the blood work. So I went back, I called and said, you know, I'd like this, 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 and this. And yeah, I got a call back saying, you're not having any of that. So that's pretty frustrating. Pretty frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I hear all kinds of stories about why the doctors won't run, you know, fasting insulin or full, you know, iron, ferritin, all that stuff. And, you know, it's just such valuable information. And it should always be interpreted, you know, correctly and, you know, within optimal versus normal ranges. But again, someone has to be able to order that stuff and get the markers run before they worry about how it's being interpreted.
Right, right.
I have a question from one of our members that she sent the question to me, and she has been trying to switch to carnivore for many times, and she's already a food addict. And all the time she's trying to switch to carnivore, she's unsuccessful. And she would like to know if it's too cold turkey for a food addict to switch to carnivore, and what would be your advice for a person like her to get rid of her addiction and to have a healthy diet?
I love that question. So it's so interesting because there's so many people that do really well with cold turkey, and there's others that do better with making gradual changes. So of course, when it comes to food addiction, sometimes the cold turkey route is a more successful route, just because making gradual changes can open up the door for someone that has food addiction, depending on what their, you know, most commonly addicted foods are, for lack of a better way to put it. So, you know, for some people, like sort of gradually getting to a meat-based keto type of way, then transitioning to carnivore can be more effective. And for others, just going through the cold turkey, the first, you know, bit of time where you might need to add more electrolytes and salt and keep some variety as far as the carnivore foods go within carnivore, of course, to kind of just get over the hump of the addiction and the cravings and all of that. Now, is carnivore going to magically make all of that stuff go away? For some people it does, and for others it doesn't. So in that process of making sure that you're also working with maybe some type of food addiction program specialists, you know, working on what is driving that, you know, what is the underlying factors driving that addiction? Is it emotional trauma? Is it just physiological imbalances? I say just because I'm meaning like hormone and digestive issues kind of creating the cravings and the inability to put those foods down, because that does happen. And just kind of managing that other side of it that is not necessarily the food side, and doing that in combination so that the person can have the most successful outcome. The same person could only work on one side and only work on the other side and truly stay in the state of struggle, because it's not happening at the same time. And so therefore it's not aligned.
Do you find a lot of your clients to be food addicted, Dani?
You know, I think some are, and some are displaying characteristics of food addiction because of underlying imbalances that they've had for so long. So when it comes to, like, I can speak from my own personal experience here, because I had terrible food cravings. I had terrible, like, I craved fats. I craved ice cream. I'm trying to sometimes I have to like channel myself to go back to all those years. Like, and I definitely had patterns of overeating, undereating, but I never necessarily had an eating disorder in the sense of like there was a trauma that caused it. For me, by the time I got into functional medicine, which was probably like maybe a year after I started just with the low carb eating, my imbalances were being driven, my food imbalances were being driven by my underlying hormone and digestive issues. So once I was able to fix those things, that combined with eating correctly for what my body actually needed, not eating fat-free, you know, bro diet, chicken, brown rice, and broccoli, which is like what my personal trainer friends were trying to get me to do to lose weight. And I was desperate. So I do think that there's a percentage of clients that come in that really have to work on the emotional side of things, whatever that trauma is, and deal with that underlying addiction piece. And I think there's another percentage that come in that just have been so out of balance physiologically for so long that once they can work on, again, the two things together, the physiological imbalances, the hormones, the gut health, all of that, figuring out what's going on from a root causal standpoint, testing, that kind of stuff, and getting the food right at the same time. So like my goal food wise, going back to Claire's question earlier, I didn't mention this, but my goal is for clients to like eat as much as they can and still be able to lose weight. So like, I just think that, all of the stars have to kind of be aligned, especially in the most significant of imbalances. But again, it's all food first always. That's kind of my foundation for everything. And then building on that with, whatever their imbalances are. And I do sometimes say like, I'm not how do I say this? Having a total brain fart. Hold on. It would be outside of my scope of practice to try to help you with the emotional trauma of the food addiction piece. So that's where I kind of refer out for that versus the person that, and they can also work on the hormone imbalances and things like that, because of course that's probably present as well. So anyways, that's a really long answer, but I hope that kind of answered it and makes sense.
I think that was a great question, and I think that was a great answer for all of us here. Thank you so much.
And you spoke about craving ice cream in the past. And is it eating carnivore ice cream now is remembering your cravings? Because I saw many people that cannot handle carnivore ice cream because they will eat like crazy, like tons of it.
I don't even have the desire for it anymore.
Yeah.
So for me, those cravings were eating too little fat on a regular basis. So the fat-free diet, and then still having the fat cravings. And of course, like my body didn't know otherwise. It didn't know to crave avocados or, beef or, ribeyes or butter or any of the better fats. So that being said, like as I transitioned into low carb keto and then carnivore, that's when all that stuff started to dissipate. So I just don't have the desire for that. In fact, this morning, I think on Instagram, Dr. Kiltz asked me, "Oh, have you tried my carnivore ice cream?" I said, "I actually haven't. It's kind of on my list for the holidays because I would have that, that type of thing during the holidays. But it's not even on my radar of like needing to replace ice cream with a carnivore ice cream or with another sort of ice cream kind of thing."
I found those kind of things to be super helpful when first transitioning, but it kind of
1000%. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, but it kind of kept my food addiction alive. So I gradually cut those things down, and now I don't crave them. But
yeah, and I definitely, full disclosure, I did too in the first quite a few years. And I definitely believe, and I know there's a lot of different opinions out there on this, I wholeheartedly believe and would rather someone have carnivore ice cream or some type of a keto treat or something that is modified from whatever the original form is than to go down the rabbit hole of sugar, gluten, things like that. And I know that people don't agree with that, but I have had perfect example if I could share. So there's a beef protein powder out there that I think we can all agree that protein powder is not the best. Meat is better. We'll just say it that way. Meat is better. But this particular protein powder in chocolate flavor mixed with butter, I've had clients do that as like a carnivore fudge, and it has saved multiple clients from going down the rabbit hole of candy bars when they've been stressed or wanted something or going to a social event or, going to a social event, either taking it with them or being able to stay away from whatever food, non-carnivore, non-keto foods are available at the event, but be able to come home and just tell themselves like, there's something waiting for me when I get home. So it releases all of the pressure of like, I can't have this. Just say no, don't have, all of the crazy restrictive deprivation stuff. So I do believe that there's a time and place and for that type of stuff for some people. And yes, if that stuff is going to send someone down the rabbit hole, and then it's not for them. But I do think, like myself included, I was very much a gradual changer versus cold turkey. And I do believe that a lot of that type of stuff contributed to helping me. And that's why I'm definitely for it for my clients and for others out there.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I do find that I have to stay away from that kind of thing now. Like the element chocolate electrolytes are really good in like yogurt. But I get obsessive with it, so I try not to do that.
Yeah, and I think it's important to be honest with yourself about what you can tolerate and what you can't. Right. I think that's the most important piece, and not worrying about what someone else on social media is going to think. If somebody wants to have a keto treat or a carnivore treat or, whatever kind of treat you want to talk about, even if it's the real thing, you got to know your limitations. You got to know what your body can handle and tolerate, and be real about what the consequences of that are.
Right. Exactly.
I think at this point, we can as well ask the other member of Heart Carnivore if they have question for you, Dani, like Lauren, Bettina, Emily. Do you have any question to ask to Dani? Specific question?
Hi, Dani.
Hi.
So I was just wondering, you touched on OMADs. I was just wondering what you thought of fasting and OMADs when a woman, so like I think I'm postmenopausal, so I still have the very occasional hot flush and nothing else. I haven't taken any hormones or anything for it rather. So I just wondered where you sort of felt the fasting and that sort of, whether that would help me in my journey to lose weight and etc.
So I first want to say with postmenopausal females, the hormone effect of any type of OMAD fasting is going to be much different than in a cycling woman. So I do believe, just as a side note, I do believe in doing a lot of things cyclically, and where someone is based on their cycle, first half or second half. I do also a lot of times will adjust macros depending on their cycles and all of that. So I do think there's a hugely beneficial sort of approach in terms of having like a cyclical component to whatever's happening for that female. Now, that being said, to go back to your question, regardless of age, stage of life, my approach is always food first, fueling before fasting. So dialing in your food, your nutrients, your macros, how much protein, fat that you should be eating on a daily basis before going for that OMAD. Because if you're not eating correctly in your eating window, that's where the problems tend to arise in your fat, as a result of fasting. So I think that, again, if you do OMAD and you feel good and you are able to get the nutrients you need in your, in your one meal, and you're not excessively doing too much OMAD or extended fasting, I think that it can be beneficial, and you should go by, how you feel, and watch things like not so much your hunger, but also watch your mental status, your focus, your mental energy. If you start to have thoughts about foods that you haven't eaten in a very long time, all of a sudden pop up. So I think all of those things can be sort of like a temperature gauge in a sense of looking at if this is working or not working.
So, but from the hormonal side of things, you don't think it necessarily affects your hormones, or?
No, I think it's much less effect in terms of hormones once you're kind of past menopause.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And there's no cycle at that point. So
yeah. Yeah.
Bettina has a question, but her phone won't allow her to unmute. She said, since doing the high fat, lower protein, she started losing hair as expected. How long do you think that will last? And should I do something about it, such as collagen, biotin, or will it self-regulate?
So I can't tell you whether or not it will self-regulate. I just can't make that call. It's possible that it might, and it's possible that it might not. So I think that if you can incorporate some collagen and biotin, whether it's bone broth, if you're able to do that based on whatever your protein goals are and what you're targeting, and get it from food sources, that's great. If you need to get it from supplement sources, I think that that's totally fine. And then kind of just seeing if that makes a difference. It would be, like I said, I can't say whether or not it will re-regulate. A lot of times hair loss, like that specific symptoms, it will like kind of go on like a 3-month cycle in a sense. So, looking to see, I don't remember, Bettina, how long it's been since you've kind of been doing the moderate protein, higher fat approach. But if you
almost 4 months, I think.
4 months. So we're talking, so we've been past the 3 months. And then, I don't know, I wish she could unmute. I'd love to ask her. June 3rd. So July, August, September, October. So it's been a little while. And is it are you newly losing hair, or have you been losing hair for a little while?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it works. Oh my gosh, that's like the first Zoom on my phone. It's working. Maybe it's an update. I have been losing like right at the 3-month mark. That's when it started falling out. And it's not as much as the first time I ever did keto in 2019. I mean, it was coming out by the handfuls. So it's not quite as bad, but it freaks me out because unfortunately I don't have luscious, beautiful hair like you do. Mine is long, but very thin. So I don't want to lose any more. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think that for you, I mean, definitely collagen and biotin can be beneficial. I would definitely try that. It can't hurt. And then if, kind of go from there and see, if you can monitor how, when you make that change, if it changes, and then, see what happens after that.
I've actually been craving like bone broth or meat broth for like the last 2 weeks. So I have been continuously making it and drinking about 1.5 cups every day, unless like we just had a funeral that we went to, so I couldn't do it. But typically it's almost like every day. Okay.
And then I know you're monitoring your numbers, so you might try to increase the amount of bone broth and then see if that changes your numbers. Like basically kind of like a protein threshold kind of thing, is seeing how much you can tolerate without getting a change in your numbers.
Okay. Yeah, I've tried it. Gosh, when that interview came out with Amber O'Hearn and I think Kelly Hogan, like with the heart muscle and all of that, I went up to for about 2 weeks, I slowly increased it from 55 to 60 grams, and then I went up to 70 and then 80. And there was like a 90-gram day in there, but I started feeling horrible. So plus my numbers went up as well. So then I lowered it back down. So it's kind of like, I'm a little confused.
Yeah, let me clarify. I meant to add just not so much adding protein. I know the bone broth is going to add a little bit of protein, but I was just saying increasing the amount of bone broth and watching your numbers and see if you can get higher amounts of bone broth without an increase in your, a decrease in the good numbers kind of thing versus like protein. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. And honestly, I haven't counted it. I've been finding, and you've known me for a little while, that the whole tracking thing, it just all of a sudden it triggered something in me, like the over obsession, not just the the tracking too, because if instead of my plain 20 grams of butter in my coffee, it was 21 grams, I actually erased it and put it, I mean, it's just stupid like that. So I kind of like, I have a food tracker that I write down. I know somewhat my grams of protein. So I kind of like loosely track you know,
So
do that.
I don't even know that you need to track necessarily. I'm just saying, like, if you increased it to 2 cups of bone broth per day and then watch your numbers, and then 2.5 cups. I mean, obviously you're going to get to a point where you're going to be like, I can't drink any more bone broth. I guess I'm just trying to encourage you to increase the food source of collagen versus going to, you know, a supplement right away.
Yeah, and that's what I have been. I actually had, I think, 2 cups the other day because I had one jar where it was just a half a cup left. But I honestly don't track the bone broth because I don't want it to come to the point where I'm like, okay, I can't add that as extra protein, you know, because I don't know, maybe I'm cheating in sort that way because I feel like I'm not chewing meat protein. I don't count it. I'm just, you know, enjoying it.
Yeah, well, it is, you know, it is incomplete in comparison to meat. So that's why I'm suggesting, like, to see if increasing the bone broth doesn't change your numbers and the way you feel, the way increasing your meat did change your numbers and the way you felt.
Okay, I got you. I got some more in that refrigerator, plenty of it. So I'll keep it going. Thank you, Dani.
I had
would you
another question
say-
sorry, Stephanie. I had another question regarding the low to moderate protein with high fat. It's not really regarding to me because I'm having enough protein in my day. And I have the 80-20 ratio with tons of calories. So I'm eating enough protein, I'm sure. But seeing a lot of people and a lot of women and a lot of menopausal women doing the high fat, low protein carnivore diet without doing any exercise like weightlifting, resistance training, I have been wondered about their ability to keep their muscle mass and their bone density, because we can see women having a walk, but lowering their protein to 60 grams or stuff like this and not exercising at all. And
this is my biggest pet peeve.
Okay.
Because you can't, I mean, we can't lower our protein and not give the body any type of stimulus to grow muscle and worry about not losing muscle. So the step one is, you know, change your macros to whatever you feel it should, you know, it should be based on whatever calculation you're using with the 80, we'll just call it the 80-20 formula kind of thing. Make sure that you're creating a stimulus for your body to be able to create and keep, you know, muscle mass. So that's resistance training, typically more than once a week, typically in a progressive overload type approach, meaning, you know, every week or 2 weeks you increase the amount of weight that you're lifting. And I just want to say, I'm not talking about you have to lift 50 pounds, you know, do bicep curls with 50 pounds. For some people, 5 pounds this week is going to be, you know, more than what they could lift last week. Maybe they were only able to curl 2 pounds last week and 5 pounds this week. So the amount of weight that you're progressively overloading, so to speak, or adding on a weekly or biweekly or monthly basis is only relative to what that individual can do. So if 15 pounds is heavier than what you're lifting now, then that's a great goal. If 7 pounds is heavier than what you're lifting now, that's also a great goal. So again, with this whole conversation of let's, you know, lowering protein to get the blood sugar numbers right and higher ketones and all of that, that's a wonderful approach. And in order to keep muscle mass and not lose muscle, again, we have to give the body some other stimulus in order to grow that muscle.
Yeah, and I had another question regarding this. To build muscle, you need to stimulate your mTOR. And if you're not having enough protein in one sitting, you cannot stimulate mTOR. And when I see people dealing with 60 grams of protein within 4 meals, for me, 15 grams of protein won't bring you at least the 2 grams of leucine mandatory to stimulate your mTOR, and you won't be able to create muscle mass.
Right. So the best approach, or the best, I don't want to even call it a theory, but 30 grams of protein per meal to stimulate muscle protein synthesis is usually approximately what's needed. That being said, I would still go back to the individual, making sure that they're doing that resistance training that we were just talking about before worrying about how much protein they're getting at per meal, if we can stimulate muscle synthesis and mTOR and all of that. Like, I wouldn't worry about the scientific pieces of it until someone is on a consistent resistance training for at least 6 to 8 weeks, getting good quality sleep at night for recovery, and then going from there as far as worrying about like the actual grams of protein for whatever process we're talking about.
Okay.
I think we get caught up in the science of it, but we got to kind of take a step back and look at the things that contribute to that too. So again, quality sleep, consistency with meals. So again, just be consistent. Even if you're getting 15 grams per meal or 20 grams per meal, that's not the technical number of leucine and all this, of all this, the nitty gritty details.
Then, I have a question. I don't know how to raise my hand on here because I'm on my phone, which I'm not used to. So it appears like I'm getting talked into doing some band training, which, bought resistance bands like about a year ago. They're still in my closet. They're safe. I can report that they're safe. Do you recommend just doing like one body part at a time, or would you just do a whole body? I don't want to overwhelm myself. I'm like, all right, I'm going to work out for an hour every day. Well, realistically, 5 to 10 minutes. I mean, I started doing lower back yoga stretches because my back has been hurting, which I think is from flavored coffee.
Okay.
That's my experiment that I have been doing.
Yeah.
But even that, I haven't done it in a few days, which we had a really rough weekend. I understand that, but even 2 days before that, I found excuses why not to do it. So I'm just wondering, would it be like focus 5 or 10 minutes on, let's see, bicep, tricep, and then the next day do your legs, or do you do whole body for 10 minutes every day or 3 times a week? Or
So this is such a great question. And again, it's always going to be in context of the person. So if you're just starting out, I would actually do more of a maybe upper body, lower body, or full body. I mean, you're talking 10 or 15 minutes, so that's not a long duration. But that's more about getting a little bit more conditioned before you spend 10 minutes on one body part that you haven't even ever trained in the last year. Right. So again, it has to be in a gradual process of what's happening. Now, if you said to me, I've been doing full body workouts for 6 months, I want to fine tune a little bit, I'm not seeing the definition that I like in my arms or my legs or whatever, then that's where someone could shift to a different type of a muscle split or one muscle a day, depending on their schedule and that kind of thing. But I think if someone's just starting out, the full body approach and just getting a little bit more conditioned, and then kind of going from there to make those adjustments, as time goes on.
Okay, that makes total sense, because it's not my thing. I used to be in the gym 3 or 4 hours every day when my now 16-year-old was like 3 or 4 years old. So it has been a long time. So I need to make it a habit. That's the thing.
Right. And I think you actually bring up a really good point. And I just want to kind of say this too, because again, everything is in context of what someone can do. Even if you've come from a background of like, I used to do XYZ for 6 hours, 6 days a week and all this stuff, but you haven't been doing that for a long period of time. Again, be safe than sorry as you try to, recondition your body and getting back into whatever routine that your goal is to get back into.
Right. Okay. I guess my fitness journal is going to come in handy, because I ordered a food journal on Amazon. It doesn't clear, but anyway. And with it came a fitness journal. And I'm like, what the crap? I know I did not order this. Why would I order that? It just came. So everybody's like, it's a sign. It's a sign. I'm like, screw the sign. Forget the sign. I don't like that sign. But maybe it is. Okay. Lorraine and Emily, y'all better help me with that.
The universe has spoken, Bettina.
It appears that way. I better take the earplug.
I think that wraps it up for today. Dani, thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge with us. This has been really helpful To everyone watching, thank you so much for your support of our channel. We will have Dani's Instagram and website info listed below if you'd like to work with Dani one-on-one. Please take a minute to like, share, comment, click subscribe, and turn on those notifications. Don't forget, you can join us for live meetings and special guest speakers when you join Heart Carnivore on the Mighty Networks for just $10 a month. The link to join that community, along with all the ways that you can connect with all of us, will be linked below as well. And we'll be back with another video real soon. Until then, thanks. Bye.